Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Marvel Snap video. So we are on that final push for the last couple of cards for our Pull 3 collection. We have a couple of cards on the wish list that we still haven't been able to pull, so I'm still really excited for each pull that we get because there's so many decks that I want to build with some of these cards that we still haven't unlocked. And speaking of final pushes, we are on the final push for 2,000 subs. I think we can potentially hit it before the end of the month, and it just blows my mind. I say this time and time again, you guys are the best community I could have ever asked for. I strongly believe that I have the best viewers on YouTube. You guys are so supportive. You offer so much positive and quality feedback, and even the feedback that's not necessarily positive, typically it's constructive, and so I'm able to take that, apply it to my gameplay, apply it to my videos, apply it to my content to make it better. So thank you guys so much, and just a really quick plug. If you guys are watching, you've watched a few of the videos and you like the content, but you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. You can help us push up over that 2,000 subscriber barrier, all while in closed beta. I'm so excited for what this game, what this community, and what this channel has in store for the future, and only time will tell exactly how that plays out, but I think it's definitely going to be exciting, and I think it's going to be very, very big. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start pulling our collector's caches. We do have 5 to try to pull a card, and so then the last card that we pulled was the last collector's reserve that we unlocked, and so let's go ahead and okay, so it's a variant. So it seems like almost every single time we unlock a card, the following collector's reserve has been a variant, and I'm okay with it. We use White Queen quite a bit, and so I'm happy with a White Queen variant. Let's open the next reserve. Punisher boosters, okay. Let's open the next one. Oh, finally. I was starting to think that Beast was going to be the last unlock on my collection log. We have so many ideas for Beast, so many cool deck ideas that I've wanted Beast since we got into Pool 3, just because of the cool utility. He makes so many combinations and so many different decks possible. I'm so excited for Beast. This card is going to make appearances in a lot of our decks. I do have one that I'm leaning towards, but honestly I have like 3 or 4 Beast deck builds in mind, all of which I think would be pretty good and pretty viable. So he helps out so many different archetypes. It's just insane. So I'm going to go ahead and draft a deck really quickly, and then I'll be right back. All right, so the first list, the deck that we're wanting to build and play Beast in first, is one that we've tried before, but just felt a little bit lackluster from not having Beast to be able to pull back in certain combo cards to re-trigger our movement buffs. So the first deck that we're going to try Beast in is a Human Torch movement style deck. Now I'm going to run through this list pretty quickly because we have a lot of games. We wanted to try and get a really big Human Torch throughout this video, and so we continued to play. So we have like 9 games. I don't know how many are going to make it into the final video, but I want to leave as much room in this timeline for them as possible. So first up, we have our cards that will benefit from movement. So we have Human Torch. When this moves, double its power. We have Vulture. When this card moves, +5 power. And then Craven. When a card moves here, this gets +2 power. One of the more common move cards that we're opting to not run is Heimdall. So Heimdall really telegraphs what play you're going to do, and yes, it's going to be able to potentially buff up our Human Torch further, it's going to potentially be able to buff up our Vulture further, but it allows the opponent to know exactly where our power is going to be to be able to try and play around it. And if we only have one really large target in Human Torch, that then becomes really easy to kind of play around. So then next we have our move engines. So we have Iron Fist as a cheap on reveal, move the next card you play 1 location to the left after it reveals. We have Cloak, which is going to allow any cards on the board to be moved into that location next turn. We have Doctor Strange, which is going to grab and move the highest powered cards to that location. So then we have our buff cards. So what we want to do is buff up our Human Torch. Similar to when we ran a Deadpool, we want to buff up our Human Torch before it starts being moved around. That really starts snowballing that power level really early. So to do that, we have Forge, which on reveal give the next card you play +2 power. And then we have Hulkbuster. So on reveal, merge this card with a random friendly card at this location. So we're going to be able to merge Hulkbuster with Human Torch to make that starting power 6 instead of 2. So the first time it moves, it's going to double to 12, and then we don't have to move it nearly as many times to make it especially large. And so then looking at the other cards that we have. So we have Beast. Beast is going to be able to return all of our other cards at this location to our hand, and they cost 1 less. So we're gonna be able to use Beast to pull back in Human Torch, pull back in Iron Fist, pull back in our Falcon even, pull back in Forge, Cloak, to re-trigger those movement capabilities so that we can more consistently and frequently move and buff up our Human Torch. We have Falcon. So Falcon on reveal, return your 1-cost cards to your hand. So this isn't going to include our Human Torch and our Iron Fist. So we can drop our Iron Fist followed by Human Torch followed by Falcon. Our Human Torch is going to move once, get buffed up, come back into our hand, and then we can do that combo again. And then the last couple of cards, we have Iron Man, which is going to serve as kind of a lane cap to push our power level up and over what the opponent would be expecting. And then lastly, we have America Chavez, who helps make the rest of our draws from our deck more consistent. We don't necessarily need to rely on this power level on the last turn, but she's there to make us draw into our other combo pieces more frequently. If we drew into our Forge and our Human Torch, by turn 3 we can drop Forge and get our Human Torch buffed up by 2. And then on turn 4 we can drop Iron Fist followed by Hulkbuster. Hulkbuster is going to complete the merge, the on reveal ability, before getting pushed by Iron Fist. So once Hulk merges with Human Torch, it is then going to push our Human Torch over and start doubling that power very early on. But that is the general idea of the deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump in. We do have so many games that we ran through and recorded, and I want to leave as much time for those as possible. Okay, so starting off our very first game, we're going against G-Man, and we don't draw into Human Torch just yet. We do have Vulture, we have Hulkbuster, we have Forge, we have some decent cards to try and generate a little bit of upside. So we're going to go ahead and drop our Kraven into the Onslaught Citadel, knowing that we will probably be able to move it with like a Cloak at some point, if we need to or if we want to. So they play a Lady Sif, which discards their death. So they're playing a high power, a large minion style deck, which is kind of scary. Not gonna lie, it's a little bit scary. We're gonna go ahead and drop our Vulture into the same location. We will pull them over. Next turn we will probably play maybe Forge and Cloak, or maybe Cloak and then Forge. That way we enable the ability to start moving our Vulture around, to buff him up by 5 for each move. We'll move Kraven first, that way he'll generate a buff for each of the other cards that are moved there. Oof, and so then they discard a Giganto, so maybe they are a Hela deck, which is very, very scary as well. So I think we go with the Cloak, and then we go ahead and just do the Forge here, which we're going to be able to move Kraven, move Vulture, move Forge, and then we can pull Vulture back over with our Doctor Strange. Oh, and they stole our Human Torch with the cable. How very, very unfortunate that they stole our move component here. So let's go ahead and move Kraven first, and then each other card that we move is going to buff up Kraven just a little bit. And then I think what we do is we go ahead and we play Doctor Strange here to pull Vulture over. So that we pull Vulture over, we can go ahead and play our Falcon because it's not going to pull any cards up. And then next turn, I think they will probably, and they get the move upside of our Human Torch, which is so unfortunate. Next turn, I think they will probably anticipate that we're going to push our cards over to the left with Heimdall. But I'm not a big fan of that type of movement component. No way, our Kraven is the largest card. Our Kraven and our Vulture. So we move both here. So we end up having a pretty large mid lane. And so if I was them, if I was G-Man in this scenario, I'm thinking that we are going to push cards over. And so if I was them, I would invest my resources into Onslaught Citadel to try to compete with this with this little power level that's going to get pushed over into mid, knowing that competing with like 40 power over in the left side is going to be really difficult. And so I would probably think that we were fine in Nidavellir, but we're going to drop Iron Man. That's going to be a 20 power lane, which is going to duplicate into a 40 power lane. I think we sneak this win out here, unless they decide to drop something into Nidavellir for some reason, which they do. I think we still sneak it out, but just not by as much of a margin as I thought we would. So they actually resummon their Giganto with Ghost Rider, but it's not enough because our Vulture and our Kraven were so very large. So yes, they got the upside of moving the Human Torch over, but we got the +2 bonus from that, pulling Kraven, which actually enabled us to pull both Kraven and Vulture over, which is really what enabled this win to happen, was them pulling our Human Torch. So even when he's not on our side, he was definitely working in our favor. All right, and so next up we have Fluff. And in our hand, we do have our Human Torch. We also have Forge, so we're going to be able to do Forge and then Human Torch. We're going to be able to do Forge on turn 2, Human Torch on turn 3. They end up destroying our Iron Man, but that's okay. And then we get Elysium for the pretty deep discount in our cards. So I think what we do is we play Forge here, we play Human Torch. If we can draw into Hulkbuster, and we would need to draw into Hulkbuster and Iron Fist to be able to then move Human Torch quickly. I think more realistically, we're going to be able to do something like dropping our cloak here, and then next turn we'll be able to move the Human Torch over. We'll be able to pull him back into our hand with Falcon. So first we're going to play Kraven, and then we'll move, I guess we'll play Kraven, which he won't get the upside of those cards that moved because he will flip afterwards. And so maybe we don't do it in that order. So maybe we move our Human Torch. That's going to make him an 8-power Human Torch. We can then pull him back over with Doctor Strange, which makes him a 16-power. And then we can drop Falcon here, which will pull him back into our hand so that we don't have to worry about him getting destroyed, or we can kind of strategically replace him as we need to or as we want to. And so they end up moving their Groot over, but that's okay because we're not keeping our Human Torch in there for long. And so we pull the Human Torch back over. He's protected over here, but we do pull him back into our hand because we are going to want to try to buff him up even further. And so we have a 50-50 shot here if we wanted to use Human Torch, but I don't think we necessarily need to. We can use Hulkbuster to buff up our cloak even further here and still keep the +5 bonus. We can drop Kraven here to make them think that we're going to do a Heimdall shift maybe, and then I'm just going to hold our Human Torch for now. That's the safest place for our little guy. Make sure that his flame does not go out. And so for the moment, we will be winning Atlantis because there's only one card in that location. Ooh, and we do get we do get Iron Fist here. So do we want to do something like Iron Fist and then Human Torch here to push cards over? I think we actually wait. We wait to see what they play, wait to see what we draw next turn, because both of these are 0 cost. So we can drop them no matter what, and it won't necessarily change or matter unless they finish capping out this lane with like a Green Goblin. And so if we play 9 power here, we won't necessarily win this location. If we play 16 power here, we'll be in the lead by 1, but with Jessica Jones, they will be buffed up by +1. So I think we play our America Chavez into this left-hand side. That only gives us +4 in that location. And so we can play our Iron Fist, which will push our Human Torch over here, but it depends on where they think we're going to play resources. I think they are going to be pretty set on having this one won, because even if we played our 16 power, that would only go up to 11, which they would come up over it with Jessica Jones. So we would either need to, this is the only way we're going to be able to push and move our Human Torch. So if I was them, where would I invest resources? I honestly don't know. But we're gonna split it this way and see where they drop their cards. Hopefully they put them in Elysium, and we end up with a high power in Wakanda. Really? And so that's not gonna do what they need to, because it caps out their Wakanda location, because we did drop most of our resources there, and then we're gonna push over Human Torch, which is going to be a 32 power Human Torch. It does come up over their leader, which got pushed into the mid. And then our Chavez does hold down this lane because we were already in the lead in Atlantis. So very fortunate that we played into Wakanda. I guess they probably were anticipating that we wouldn't drop our resources into Wakanda, or we would just be dropping a Heimdall, which they could then copy and then push their cards over. But overall, just very, very fortunate that they didn't have enough space to copy both the Human Torch and the Iron Fist. And even if they did, the Iron Fist would have remained here. And so we still would have won these 2 lanes. Very, very satisfying win around their leader play. All right, so next up we have Brios. And the first card that gets pulled in for them is Moon Girl, which kind of creates some downside for them. They're not going to draw a new card unless they had something that's going to specifically benefit from being doubled. So like a Devil Dino, that would be a pretty good card if they had Devil Dino in hand. And we get Forge, so the next card that we play is going to get buffed up. Ideally, it would be our Human Torch, but it doesn't look like that is going to happen. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and drop our Kraven into Sakaar. That is going to give him the Forge bonus here. And then depending on what this last location is, we may either hold Beast or we may go ahead and play Beast. It just depends. Okay, so the last location is Murder World. So I almost want to drop Beast here because we do need to get some power out onto the board. I think it's going to be a little bit too late for our Human Torch, but if we pull these back into our hand, we'll be able to rebuff Forge, or we'll be able to rebuff a card with Forge. We'll be able to drop Kraven, and then maybe Cloak into a lane so that we can move multiple cards over. We'll be able to create some pretty decent upside in that lane. And so then, depending on where they put their real Mysterio token, it may have created some downside in destroying their actual Mysterio here. And so now we have Hulkbuster, not a huge card for us at the moment, but what we can do is we can do a Kraven and a Cloak here. That's going to give us the ability to shift over our cards, or at least some of our cards. Could be all of them, could be just a handful. And then we could pull one out with Doctor Strange. It gives us some unique upside here. And so then they used Wave. So maybe we don't want to... So maybe next turn what we do is we move our cards over. We know that we're going to be able to pull at least one of them out with Doctor Strange. So maybe it's that we now drop our Iron Man. Oof, but actually no, we don't want to pull a card out. So maybe we just drop Iron Man here, leave Beast in lane. But that feels kind of bad as well. So maybe we move them over and we go ahead and we pull Kraven out this turn. So whatever we do, we need to pull Kraven out before this turn ends, because if we dropped Doctor Strange next turn like we were wanting to, we would end up leaving Mojo World with only 3 cards in it. And we want to make sure that that's capped out to try and get the most possible upside. Ooh, and so they happened to have the nice upside of having Death in their hand whenever Moon Girl got dropped into Sakaar. So very, very fortunate there. And so we do have a 10 power Kraven. What we can do is we can drop our Iron Man, and then we can drop an Iron Fist. It's not going to push anything over, but we don't necessarily want it to. By dropping Iron Man, we'll be able to potentially expand this lead into a win. That'll give us 26 power. They may just be giving up in Mojo World, but if they're not and they're somehow able to flood this lane this turn, then it becomes pretty tough. So I would anticipate maybe a Magneto, which is also not great for us. We wouldn't win this lane, but I think we need to see it play out. Magneto here would be my play. Ooh, and so it's just a Chavez. And so we know that Chavez is not going to be able to match our Iron Man's power. We drop the Iron Fist to cap out Mojo World, and we sneak away the win. They had a double death drop, and we were able to sneak away the win with some kind of strategic play with our Kraven. We never drew into our Iron Torch or our Vulture, our 2 primary move cards, and we were still able to kind of find a way to sneak it out through pretty non-conventional means. But very good game, Brios, very good game. All right, next up we have Before. And before we stop recording videos, I would really like to get a big Human Torch this time. So let's go ahead and skip this turn. We have Forge, so we're going to be able to buff up our Human Torch if we draw into him. but it's not looking good so far. So I guess we're going to just play our Forge next turn depending on what we draw into. We might either drop our Vulture into the Bifrost, and so they played, what, a Mysterio? Which split their cards dropped everywhere. And so this one can't be the real one. If this one's the real one, that's okay. But if not, and we can win this location, because since Mysterio won't reveal and show power until the end of the game, we have a pretty good chance at sneaking away some power here. And so while I do want to play our Vulture, but at the same time, I kind of want to maybe just drop a Cloak, or maybe next time I just do a Cloak and a Craven. So we're going to do a Vulture. We're not going to be able to move cards with our... Oh, so I think it has to be the... Oh, no, maybe not, because they're acting like they're going to destroy it. So maybe this is the real Mysterio. And so maybe we don't drop cards here. I think I'm just going to go with this, the Craven and Cloak combo, into the mid lane, and they drop a Deathlock. Ew, ours is going... No, it's going to be a tie. Nope, we should win, because Craven should get buffed up by the Cloak and then by Deathlock, so by 2. So theirs is going to be destroyed here in Hala. So we get a pretty big upside. All they have left is the 1 token and then their Winter Soldier. And then we can, of course, move our cards back over here if we need to. And so I'm thinking maybe we don't use the move component here. Maybe we do something like a Human Torch and a Hulkbuster. It doesn't necessarily matter which one it grabs onto, because we're not necessarily planning on pushing anything this turn. So we're going to go ahead and we'll lock that in. That does leave us a space to play here if we need to, or here, ideally targeting our Iron Man for turn 6. And so they do push some power into the Bifrost, but they may be anticipating a Heimdall shift. So they do a Carnage and a Wave. So I think we may just go with an Iron Man to the right-hand side. We could drop a Chavez, and it would give us 19. Iron Man's going to bump us up to 20. Or maybe we don't do that, and we just split our power here. So if we drop Chavez, they're going to have to swing. Yeah, I think this is the play. If we drop our Chavez, then without them dropping any cards, we will have won all 3 lanes. They're only going to be able to drop 2 cards. So they're going to be able to drop 2 cards, and it depends on where they drop them at. So if they drop a 12 power Death here, and the 5 power buffs us up, they would tie this lane. So I think we go with power in. I think we go with our original plan here. Bumping this up to 20, keeping this at 17. So if they drop, let's say, a Death here, and we tie in this lane, depending on what they drop and where, we may be able to still sneak out the win. So I anticipate like a Death and a Magneto is the most common. So there's the Death, and then a Chavez. And so that was the real one, but their Death is not able to come up over our 20 cost, up over our 20 power. The Chavez is not enough to swing this lane. So it does turn out that it would have been okay no matter where we dropped our card. If we had done Chavez, we still would have been in the lead. All right, next up we have Silen, and we finally draw into our Human Torch right out of the gate. So we're not going to play him. We want to play this cool. We want to wait a little bit. We want to see what else we draw into. If we get, I'm so afraid to say that the new featured location's name, because I butchered it in our last video. This is a little tough. So we can do Forge here. Next turn we can do our Human Torch, but this middle location is going to be tough because we're not going to be able to drop a beast there, so we can push our Human Torch one time. Then we would have to rely on being able to pull him into the locations we need. So we can do our Human Torch. Next turn we can do Hulkbuster, and I think maybe even pulling him back into our hand would be okay. We would have to get a really good top deck to be able to have our Iron Fist for the next turn. So I think we're most likely going to go under the assumption that we're not going to have it. But if we can draw into our Iron Fist, when we drop Iron Fist and then Hulkbuster, it will cause our Human Torch to move. How does he do it? He doesn't know. So we're going to go ahead and drop our Iron Fist. 1 in 7 shot. We're going to go ahead and drop our Iron Fist, followed by the Hulkbuster. The Hulkbuster will merge with our Human Torch before getting moved from the Iron Fist on reveal ability. We're going to lock that in. We're going to keep Ninja in our hand, and they play a card into the Crimson Cosmos. So we're going to have a 8 power Human Torch. And so it will double into 16 once we move him. But that's going to be really the last time we can touch him. After that, we would need to either pull him out, drop Iron Man, something similar. Maybe what we do is we drop Forge and then we drop our Vulture. That will allow our Vulture to be buffed up ever so slightly. And then they're going to be under the assumption that we are going to push our cards with Heimdall, or that leap in thought process is going to be a pretty common one. And so what we're going to do instead, so they actually tie us in Crimson Cosmos here. So what we're going to do instead is we dropped our Rock, which gives it +1 power, which isn't anything great. We could drop Iron Man here, but we're going to drop it into Xandar, hoping that we get this lead by enough that it doesn't matter if we tie this lane and they win this one, or however that ends up playing out. I think this is going to be our highest power output. It's going to make this lane 20. I think giving us as much advantage as we potentially can in this scenario. A 16 power Human Torch isn't huge, but it's pretty big. So we drop our Iron. Ooh, and so they extend the game by 1. Unfortunate. Okay, so that lowers our power output here, but they are going to have to drop resource at least 4 power into this lane to win. They can't be targeted by Shang-Chi in this lane. We can drop our Chavez either location, but I think we drop it into Shadowland, knowing that they need to swing some of these other locations. We're okay with a push or a tie here as long as Captain Marvel can't swing somewhere or move somewhere to win the game. So we're going to lock in Chavez on the far left side. I don't know that this is the best play line or going to be perfect, but it is, I think, going to be our best shot. So they use Odin, which re-triggers Korg and a few of their other abilities. So that's a really high power card to push into Limbo. And so we're going to need to win this location by more than 6. And then by more than they win here. We would need to win it by more than 6 because otherwise Captain Marvel could swing over and win that second location. But because of the way that this balanced out and because they invested so many resources into Limbo, our 16 power Human Torch is enough to tie us. Then we win Shadowland by more than they win Limbo. And so we're not making huge Human Torches, but this deck list is performing very consistently. Out of the 7 wins that we've gotten, we've only dropped 2 games. And being this late and with a move style deck that's really reliant on one card specifically, that's not bad. That's in line with some of our other like meta style decks. That is game 7. I'm going to go ahead and record one more as a final attempt to get a really large Human Torch. But if not, then we're gonna have to call it quits. All right, so next up we have Matt, and we do draw into the Bifrost here. So we're gonna go ahead and pass our first turn, most likely play Kraven next turn, and then we can kind of play around depending on what we draw into. And so this next one, and they drop Nova, so maybe they're running the Kingpin combo that we ran in our earlier video. But I think we're safe because if they drop Kingpin, I would assume that it's going to be into Kunlun, and then Kunlun being a good location for things being shifted over because they're all going to get +2 power. But I think we need to play it safe. I think we need to see if they're going to drop a Kingpin here. Ooh, and they don't. Okay. So we may have missed... Oh, wait. See if they're going to drop a Kingpin here. And if so, then we don't want our cards here, but we can go ahead and drop our Vulture. If they drop a Kingpin, we can pull Vulture over with Doctor Strange, and then all 3 of them are going to move over into Danger Room and avoid Kingpin. And so he drops Electro. Interesting. So now they're only going to be able to play 1 card per turn, and so they have a decent amount of downside. But I do think what we do, I think we still play our Doctor Strange here. Or maybe we do something kind of sneaky in no, because then he'll pull it into the Danger Room. So I think we play our Doctor Strange. We can go ahead and play our Iron Fist second. That way, whenever they move over into the Danger Room, Kraven is going to get buffed up pretty large. And then we're going to be able to move the selected ones out with Cloak. And so Kraven will get buffed up from the Vulture move, and he uses Venom. Okay. And so then he has the increased max energy, but he doesn't have the downside of only being able to play 1 card per turn. So not terrible. It is so he had 5 energy and he had to use 3 energy as his follow-up turn, which makes it a little bit less ideal. And so we have pretty big cards here. What we can do is drop our Cloak. We could drop a Hulkbuster here, which is going to give us the most power. And then knowing that we can move cards over and they're going to get the benefit or the buff from Kunlun, I think we go ahead and lock that in. They're going to be able to move cards over as well, but they don't have as many available cards as we do. And so then our cloak does get pushed by our Iron Fist here, which we had actually forgotten about. So we can move. Okay. We were going to try to figure out where the best possible moves were. We were going to probably move maybe just the Vulture or maybe Kraven, Doctor Strange, and Iron Fist over here to buff up Kraven. And then they would, of course, buff themselves up as well and leave Vulture here, and then probably drop our Chavez into the Bifrost so that we have a chance at winning all 3 lanes and we would disperse that power. But another game where we did not have a huge Human Torch, but the move components, the Kraven and the Vulture, and just the overall interaction with Bifrost and Kunlun, just really carrying this deck and making it perform very, very well. Okay, so next up we have Matt again. And this time we have the cloning vats as one of our locations. So we're gonna be able to potentially do some cool things. We do have Human Torch in our starting hand, but I would like to have Iron Fist first, which they have. I would like to have Iron Fist to be able to push our Human Torch over or do something similar, but maybe we don't need to. So we can drop our Human Torch here. Next turn we can pull it with Doctor Strange. It's not gonna be our highest power card though. We're gonna need something to make it our highest power card. So we're gonna need to draw into like Hulkbuster or something similar. And then the Vulture's not bad here either. Maybe we just play the Vulture, which will, and they're doing a multiple man, which we shy away from because 2/3 can clog up the board quite a bit. It just feels like it takes up too much space. So we're gonna go ahead and do a Vulture, which will duplicate into our hand. We're gonna be able to grab Vulture with our Doctor Strange though, since it's our highest power card. But I am wondering if we want to drop one additional Vulture first before we do the Doctor Strange. So if we wait a turn, we can do Vulture, we can do Doctor Strange into an empty lane, followed up with Beast in that same turn to pull them back into our hand, and we can redistribute that power level across the board. And we are going to play a Rock into Lemuria just to get rid of it. We want to kind of clear up our hand because we are going to have quite a few cards that we're going to need to pull back in. And so if we now drop our Doctor Strange and our Beast, it's going to pull 2 cards over. And then 3, 4, 5, we only have space to pull back in 2 cards here. So I don't know. I think it'll pull in 1 Vulture and then 1 Doctor Strange. And then we're going to drop them into Subterranea so that we don't buff up their Kravens. We're wanting to kind of avoid moving into that lane because of how big Kraven can get and how quickly Kraven can get pretty large. So we do pull over both Vultures here. We pull back in 1 Vulture and 1 Doctor Strange before we hit our hand cap. And so we can, this being the final turn, we can move cards over. If we think it is going to be beneficial, we could do something like a Doctor Strange, a Vulture, and then a Human Torch. Or do we forego Doctor Strange here? No, we need to pull a card. And so I think maybe we pull the Vulture into cloning vats with our Doctor Strange. We then followed up with a 8-power Vulture and a 2-power Human Torch, which will give us an okay amount of power in Subterranea. If they use a Heimdall shift, then we need 11 power in Subterranea, so that would be 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So then we could still win this one. They could potentially push their cards over. I think it spreads us out enough, and so they do drop a Heimdall here. So they, depending on what gets shifted around, their multiple man does come back over. This one can't go back. As long as we can come up and over that power level, which I don't know that we do. With the Kraven that would be buffed up in the cloning vats. Had it moved over their other Kraven, they would have won. But because we were able to pull over just 1 Vulture, it buffed their Kraven up by 2 instead of any more, and it would have cost us the game. Very, very close game, Matt. Very, very close. We were somehow able to sneak this out through our Vulture play. Unfortunately, we didn't have any engines or ways to move our Human Torches, but still we were able to squeak it out just barely. So with that game, we are going to go ahead and end the video. We have 9 wins recorded. We have about 3 others that we lost. One had some really big potential, huge Human Torches, but we end up messing up the play line, and we ended up losing that just barely. But otherwise, our Human Torch hasn't been incredible. he's been just okay. Typically we don't have him in hand, or we don't have the couple of cards to buff him up or move him. And without having that Heimdall at the very end to shift all of our cards over, which is predictable, but it does let your snowballing cards snowball further. And without having that, our Human Torch hasn't been just incredibly massive, but he has been very consistent. Out of the 12 games we played, we dropped 3, we won 9. And with a movement style deck, that is okay in my book. I am okay with those metrics. And then most of those games coming before Bifrost became a featured location. Of course, Bifrost helping enable some of your move components a little bit, which helps you kind of snowball further or faster, but it's not a necessity for this deck to perform well. I am going to go ahead and end the video. Thank you guys so much for continuing to come back, continuing to enjoy the content. I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate every single like, comment, view. I hope that you enjoyed it. I am going to go ahead and end the video here. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.